One of the things that's really unusual about your experience is that you follow your mom's path. It's your mom. Of course, usually it's the dad who is, the career soldier or, Air Force officer or something like that. In your case, it's your mom who is she National Guard? Do I have that right?
Was Army Reserves.
Army Reserve. Okay, so Army Reserve Lieutenant Colonel. I have that right?
He retired as a lieutenant colonel. Yep.
Yeah, and she deployed to the Gulf. So you write about that a bit. You were very young when your mom deployed to the Gulf. And then you follow your mom into the path of military service. Um, so I'm interested in that. You know, uh, how conscious of a thing was that for you that you wanted to follow your mom's example of putting on the uniform and being an officer in uniform?
It was very subconscious. You mentioned I was very young when my mom deployed. I was 7 years old, and she was in the wave of reservists that was activated to deploy in support of Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm back in 1990, 1991. So it was the type of experience that was very unexpected. She was with a massive hospital unit. She was an Army nurse. And it was one of those things that, like, they all almost kind of joked, like, for us to deploy, it would take World War III. Like, it would have to be something really big, really significant to mobilize this huge unit, this expensive unit to relocate. And then that happened. And so our family was dealing with the very unexpected shock of that, the void of having mom suddenly sucked out of our lives, and also just, as a community we weren't on a base because she was a reservist, so we didn't have that same type of infrastructure that active duty service members have. And we had an amazing community, amazing school group, folks who supported us, but it also felt very isolating. And as a 7 year old, and as a very emotional person, who was very close to my mom, I still am, it just completely traumatized me in a lot of ways. So, looking at that piece of it, it seems very strange that I decided to join the military. And it took me a long time after I got back to really understand that my mom's influence was a big part of that. I have revered my mom for as long as I can remember. She's my hero. I mean, she's an amazing mother, and I also just grew up seeing her as so many other things. And a soldier was one of them, and a nurse, a healer, someone who just, you know, ran into a war zone to help people. And so all of that was very much internalized
Yeah.
and didn't really come to the surface. It was kind of this latent desire, I think, that I had to, chase something similar to that. And then 9/11 happened my senior year of high school. And I distinctly remember driving home from school that day and, being kind of just caught up in my thoughts, had the radio on, which is playing the same kind of messages that it had been playing all day, no new news. And then I pulled up to this intersection, and there were people waving American flags and holding signs, and it was just this like huge rush of patriotism that felt very similar to when my mom had returned from Desert Storm. And that was, again, in hindsight, a very short, successful, decisive campaign. And my mom and her unit and the veterans in general came back as heroes. So I felt the same kind of rush of emotion as I had back in 1991. And then Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA came
Mm.
on the radio, which was a song that came out during the Desert Storm era, and that my mom and her unit kind of, had as their anthem. And I like literally almost swerved off the road just because the emotion was so strong. And when I look back, I kind of identify that moment as all of these things that had been, percolating under the surface, just kind of awakening in me. And again, it wasn't like I, immediately drove to the recruiting station and signed a contract. I filled out a military aptitude test and applied for scholarships, and then I got one. And it was like, that was the first domino. And then these other things just fell into place. Then I got a scholarship to my dream school in Southern California on the beach. And then I, got stationed on the beach in Florida. So all of these things that seemed very, appealing and benign, and just really having, no concept in my naive teenager's mind of the potential of this commitment that I had made.
Even though we look back at the Gulf War as kind of this thing that's over quickly. Things we feared did not come to pass. There was this concern about the Iraqi military as a serious, formidable force. That turned out really not to be the case. The war is over quickly. The troops come
Chemical warfare was a huge threat that thankfully didn't materialize. Yeah.
forward, right? And you mentioned that your mom having to have on the suit to protect against chemical warfare and all of that stuff. Um, so in a way, it's kind of the ideal war. It's over quickly. There aren't very many casualties. The population feels great about it. The president's approval rating skyrockets to 90%, something like that. But your mom still, though, carried some burdens from that war experience, didn't she?
She did. She didn't share a lot of them, and a lot of it is because of the things you mentioned, and just this, you know, climate in the greater population and in the veteran community as well. Like, hey, we did it! Congratulations, we're all awesome.
Mm.
And there was no, infrastructure really set up to support particularly reservists with that transition. And that was the largest activation of reserve forces. And tens of thousands of people who you didn't have that kind of reintegration support or acknowledgement that, hey, there may be some things that you're dealing with that, we have resources to help you deal with them. It was very much just, okay, we did it, good job, thanks for your service, now, get back on with your lives. And so that's what my mom did. And there were moments, particularly now reflecting and talking to my mom, where it was obvious that there was more going on that she wasn't sharing. She would burst into tears every time Lee Greenwood's song came on. And we we paraded her around at Veterans Day assemblies at our schools, and she was always kind of like the token veteran speaker. And she hated those events. She always did them, and from my perspective as a child, did them, enthusiastically and wonderfully. And I was so proud to watch her doing that. But she hated it because it made her think about all of those, the good, the bad, and the ugly of her experience that she just hadn't had a space to express. So she just repressed it all really until I got home, and also was repressing things until I couldn't. And then they came out and I shared them with her. And then she in turn shared some of her darker experiences and buried trauma with me as well.
Well, yeah, that answers the question. That partly answers the question that I have next. And maybe if you're willing to expand on that a bit more, if you have daughter to mom discussions, but do you sometimes have war vet to war vet discussions?
Yeah, we do. And I think that the lines are blurry. She, as I said, my mom and I have always been close, and this was like a new layer of our relationship that emerged when I got back. And she was one of the first people that I really opened up to about my experience.
Mm.
And just by virtue of our relationship, was able to open up in a more complete way. And that encouraged her to do the same. And she literally shared with me things that she hadn't told anyone in 20 years. And it was mother to daughter, but it was also veteran to veteran. And we were able to really latch onto so many different common threads of our experiences, despite the decades that separated them, and the fact that she was an Army nurse and I was an Air Force public affairs officer, and the conflicts were very different in so many ways, but just all of these, kind of the emotional undertones of them and the feelings that resulted from some of the experiences were very, very similar.